At the NATO summit in Ankara, security remains at the top of the agenda as allies confront a rapidly evolving global landscape. From Russia's war in Ukraine to rising tensions in the Middle East, leaders are seeking greater coordination on some of today's most urgent challenges. I spoke with the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, about her recent visit to Turkey, the future of EU-Turkey relations, Europe's security priorities, and the crises unfolding in Ukraine and the Middle East. I'm Aslat Baş, and this is One on One. Kaja Kallas, thank you so much for talking to TRT World and welcome to Ankara. Now, with growing security concerns, challenges across Europe and beyond, what are your expectations from this NATO summit and what message of unity should allies send to the world?
Well, you correctly pointed out unity is, I think, the most important, that all the allies come together and look at the ways that we can push the defense investment, innovation, everything together forward. I think this is extremely important. Of course, we also discuss what more can we do to help Ukraine, what more can we do also in other conflicts like the one in Middle East, what is our approach there. So there is a lot on the table.
I would like to break down that, but I want to ask you about your latest visit, your recent visit to Ankara only last week. You met with President Erdogan, and we see Turkey becoming an important actor in regional security from the Black Sea to the Middle East, and it also continues to play a key role within NATO. So following your meetings in Ankara, how do you assess Turkey's contribution to Euro-Atlantic security, and do you see an opportunity for opening a new chapter in relations between Turkey and the European Union?
Yes. You correctly pointed out that Turkey is a very important player in the regional security. I mean, very importantly also contributing in having peace and security in the region. Of course, we have our relationship with Turkey. Turkey is a candidate country, and we have some also issues that we need to discuss, whether it's about fundamental freedoms or it's about also the Cyprus issue. But we have a lot that also connects us. I mean, the connectivity topics, also issues regarding migration, issues about economy and the cooperation that we can have. So we had that discussion last week here with different counterparts, how we can actually push this relationship forward.
And you were talking about discussions about increasing support for Ukraine. And right ahead of the summit, we see increasing attacks in Ukraine. And despite all these diplomatic efforts, so what more should Europe and its allies do to strengthen Ukraine's position? And how do you see the future of European security in this context?
Yes. That's a very valid question. We have seen these horrendous attacks that are targeted towards civilians to really hurt the people. And although the drone interceptor rate is very high, so Ukraine is able to take down the drones, there is not that much air defense when it comes to ballistic missiles. So we need to really discuss what more can we do there. Then also on the European level, we have the sanctions. We are discussing the 21st package of sanctions, and this is all directed towards putting more pressure on Russia so that they would stop this war, that they couldn't fund this war, because wars also end when an aggressor runs out of money. This is all targeted so that Ukraine and Russia would sit down together to actually negotiate. Ukraine has offered that several times, but Russia is still not there yet, and that's why we need to increase the pressure.
And speaking of wars and civilians being targeted, the situation in Middle East also remains highly volatile. Now, following the recent memorandum of understanding between the US and Iran, Tehran has reportedly raised some concerns over maritime security, especially in the Strait of Hormuz, but also Israel's military operations continue in both Gaza and Lebanon. So how do you assess these developments from a European security perspective? Now, do you believe this MOU will stand? But also, the Israeli government under Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing enough to prevent further regional escalation, and what role should the EU play at this stage?
I mean, many questions there. First, let's start with the MOU. I think it's a very welcoming step, but it's the beginning, of course, of the hard negotiations on hard topics, where Europe is also willing to contribute. When it comes to the nuclear expertise, we have we can contribute, or it comes to other issues that are also difficult and concerning us, because it's also our neighborhood, like it is your neighborhood. Whatever happens here also has an impact on us. Then the issue of freedom of navigation is very important to us, and we are sending strong messages and also doing the outreach to other countries in the world that freedom of navigation should not be hindered, or any kind of tolls or service fees cannot be asked for these international waterways. Otherwise, we will have more of this, and then in the end, the most vulnerable will pay the highest price. When it comes to Israel, of course, we see them having elections, and we see some very worrying developments. We have been very vocal about this as well, what is happening in West Bank. That's why we put the sanctions also on the violent settlers. We have the discussions coming up again on Monday. What more can we do? And of course, we have also not all the member states in the same place, so it's very hard to have a unified position, but I think everybody is condemning the actions that we see on the West Bank and in Gaza.
And speaking of European security, one of the biggest discussions here at the NATO summit in Ankara is the defense cooperation. Now, it's something that is going to be widely discussed by NATO member countries. And this summit being held in Ankara is especially significant because, as it has been announced by NATO Chief Mark Rutte, we are seeing many cooperation and collaboration among NATO countries as well as Türkiye. So how important, in your opinion, cooperation between Türkiye and European allies in strengthening NATO's collective security?
Well, Turkey has a very, very important and significant defense industry, and that is also recognized by many of our member states who already have collaborations and joint projects, and who buy Turkish military capabilities as well. So there is definitely also more room for cooperation. Of course, on the European level, it is up to the member states to decide.
Kaja Kallas, thank you so much for talking to TRT World.
Thank you.